Infrastructure Services Department. So we will be recording tonight's session and we'll be posting on our webpage. This is the 5th Public Information Center for this project. The last PIC occurred in March 2022, where we shared 3 land use options for the secondary plan. And tonight's information session provides an opportunity to learn and ask questions about the emerging land use plan and policy directions for the Courtice Transit-Oriented Community Secondary Plan. So in a moment, we will introduce the rest of the team and review tonight's agenda. Next slide, please. So before we get started, I'd like to begin this evening's session with a land acknowledgement. The municipality of Clarington is situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas and the Chippewas of the Anishinaabe, known today as the Williams Treaties First Nations. Our work on these lands acknowledges their resilience and their long-standing contribution to the area now known as the municipality of Clarington. So now let's introduce the team members. Joining us from Clarington on this project is Lisa Backus, Manager of Community Planning, Karen Richardson, Manager of Development Review, and working with the municipality on this project as the lead consultant is Urban Strategies, and Seema as the sub-consultant is also joining us today. And so now I will hand it over to Tim Smith and Jamila Mohammed from Urban Strategies, and they'll take us through tonight's session.
Thanks, Emily. Good evening, everyone. For today's meeting, we want to provide you all with an update on the study process and the timeline, and to also give you a sense of what has been done and what remains to be completed. We'll also be going through the draft preferred CTOC land use plan, the road network, and policy directions. This will be the focus of our discussion, and we look forward to your feedback on the materials presented. The discussion will also provide an opportunity for members of the community to identify areas and topics for further discussion and consideration. So we really want to hear from you all today, and we'll bring these questions back up towards the end of the presentation. But just for you to have a sense of the type of questions and conversations we want to have, we want you to look through the materials and think through, does it align with your vision for the area? If not, what is missing from the plan and what would you like to see included? What do you like most about the land use plan that we'll share? And are there any elements of the plan or policy directions that you think we should be considering again? For our agenda today, we'll begin with a bit of an introduction and meeting protocol. We'll provide an overview of the planning process and background and focus most of our attention on the presentation. We'll conclude with questions and comments and let you know what some of our next steps will be. To begin, we'll have all the participants muted during the presentation. You'll also have the opportunity to use the chat function at any time to provide feedback or ask a question. And we'll also be having pop-up polls that appear, so please answer the questions that appear on your screen. And to begin, just to get a sense of who's in the room, we'll do our first poll. And I'm going to just pull it up on the screen. Can everybody see that? So the first question is, where are you joining us from? And your options are Courtice, Bowmanville, Newcastle, Orono, or any other location outside of the Clarington area. We also have a second question. If you can select which of the following best describes who you are, so we get a sense of who's in the room with us. If you're a member of the public, a major landowner or developer in the area, a consultant, or a public servant or government staff. So we'll give it a few minutes or a few seconds to go. Okay, I think we've got almost everybody responding. Great, thank you. And I'm just going to conclude. We'll see the share the screen. You can see the results. So most of the folks joining us on the call are coming from outside of the Courtice, Bowmanville, Newcastle, and Orono area. And we see we have a mix of members of the public, major landowners, as well as consultant team members. Great, thank you. In terms of the meeting protocol, just a few things to kind of go over. You'll see on your screen, if you want to raise your hand, you have to first press the participants button. And then in your menu option that opens to the right of the screen, there's a raise hand function if you would like to ask a question. And then also to leave a comment in the chat, please press the chat icon at the bottom and you can leave a short written question. Okay, so we'll get into the presentation and provide you with an overview of the planning process and background. So the Courtice transit-oriented community planning process has been an ongoing effort for over the past 5 years and includes multiple opportunities for the public and stakeholders to provide us input and feedback through each of the phases of the project. The first phase of the project focused on conducting background research and technical analysis that helped inform the development of 3 land use options, and it concluded with the Public Information Center in September 2020. During the second phase of the project, it involved preparation of land use options that illustrated different arrangements of open spaces and land uses, and they were also shared at a PIC meeting in March 2022. We are now in phase 3 of the project and focusing on developing a preferred land use plan. We'll also be drafting the secondary plan and urban design and sustainability guidelines and zoning bylaw, as well as other technical studies. There have been 3 sessions with landowners to date as part of phase 3, and we're aiming to finalize the deliverables in June 2024. Taking a closer look at phase 3, you'll see that we're in the process of beginning to draft documents and aiming and leading us towards this PIC meeting. The draft materials will be made available to the public at the end of January in advance of a February 2024 public statutory meeting. And our team will be turning our attention to implementing revisions and finalizing documents for the council adoption in June 2024 afterwards. So I'll pull up another poll just to get you all to participate. And so, sorry, one second. And for this question, we're looking to see if participants in the public, to see how frequently you've participated in any of the public engagement meetings that we've had. Okay, so we've done that. Okay. Oh. Apologies. Slide 12, launch, okay. So the question is asking you, have you participated in any public engagement activities related to the CTOC secondary plan? That could have been through stakeholder meetings, other PIC sessions. Give it a few more seconds. Okay, great. So it looks like the majority of the folks have actually participated in one or more of the public engagement activities. So that's wonderful. And welcome to the folks who are just joining us. So in the conversations that we've had with stakeholders and participants from the public, we've heard a few things that have been kind of recurring themes. So folks have expressed the support for the planning objectives and vision presented in the options for the Courtice, transit-oriented community. They've also expressed an interest in prioritizing the local public transit and active transportation. We've also had folks ask about the existing employment uses and proposed mix of employment opportunities in the area. And folks have also expressed an interest in delivering a mix of housing typologies and tenures. This feedback that we received has informed our thinking as we've moved through this process. So what is the secondary plan? A secondary plan is a policy document that can be considered as a second layer of a citywide official plan. It provides a framework for guiding growth, and it's defined in a defined area of the city. It also provides policy directions on permitted land uses, roads and infrastructure, natural heritage, parks and open space, built form and densities, cultural assets, and community uses, including schools, community centers, sports facilities, and others. The Courtice Transit-Oriented Community Secondary Plan is one of several ongoing planning studies that have been initiated by the city. The secondary plan focuses on the lands located in the south end of Courtice, north of the Highway 401, and that's the area that's colored in red here. This area is at the center of growth in South Courtice, including the future transit, the GO station, and the surrounding major transit station area here in the dotted red line. So Metrolinx is advancing plans for a GO train expansion, and they're continuing to refine design for a recommended option. The proposed new route will strengthen GO services dramatically within the community by providing two-way all-day service and integral connections to the existing Durham Region Transit bus network. Provincial policies have emphasized the significance of transit-oriented development as highlighted in the provincial policy statement here. Some policies speak to accommodating a significant supply and range of housing options through transit-oriented development, TOD, helping prioritize intensification in proximity to transit corridors and stations, as well as improving the mix of employment and housing to shorten the commutes and decrease congestion. The growth plan also speaks to the significance of major transit station areas, or MTSAs, as areas to focus mixed use and higher density growth. These policies address the lands within 500 to 800 meters of higher order transit stations, such as the GO station. They also focus on transit supportive densities and a diverse mix of uses. They set minimum density targets, and the Courtice MTSA will be planned to achieve a target of 150 people and jobs per hectare. Development in the MCSA should also be planned to have a range of housing options, and the Planning Act provides municipalities with tools to require a defined amount of affordable housing within new developments through tools such as inclusionary zoning. Through the conversations that we've had with the public, stakeholders, and landowners, we've been able to integrate that into a set of planning policies. These 15 guiding principles were developed for the CTOC area to guide planning and provide a foundation for the secondary plan. The principles were informed by the study team's analysis of opportunities, review of the best practices in the transit-oriented community design, and consultations. In addition to guiding the development of land use options, the principles provide a basis for the criteria used to evaluate the 3 land use options that we've already spoke about. And the guiding principles are grouped under 3 themes, key themes: the environment, places for living and work, moving around, the public realm, and fiscal sustainability. So I'll pass it to Tim, who will speak to you more about how we've integrated the feedback into the draft preferred land use plan, road network, and policy directions.
Great. Thanks, Jamila. Good evening, everyone. Before I jump into the draft preferred land use plan, I just want to spend a few slides, provide a little bit more background. Hopefully from Jamila's part of the presentation, you get a sense of a lot of the background work that has been done and what's gotten us to this point. But more specifically, what's led us to the preferred land use plan is the exploration of some land use options that began, well, almost 2 years. We have been at the study for quite some time, as some of you are well aware of. Coming out of our first phase of work, we identified what you're seeing here on the screen, a very high level kind of framework, we called it, for defining land use districts and generally exploring land use options. And there's some really 5 big ideas behind this framework. The first is a recognition of the very significant natural features we have almost completely surrounding the CTOC area, thanks to the valley lands of the Robinson Creek and Tule Creek and some of the forested areas within CTOC. So these provide almost a ring of green spaces around our area, which is really going to help to create an identity for the area and be an amenity for the future neighborhoods, future folks living here. Of course, we have the GO station really at the heart of CTOC, and that will provide a focus for higher density and the greatest mix of uses in the heart of the area. There is a grid of major roads fundamental to the framework, and you'll see in the land use options and in the preferred option that there really is just kind of one main idea for where most of these roads should generally be located, as you're seeing here by the black lines. And then we have the strong idea of a north-south, what we're calling a green spine that runs straight through the Seatalk area and ultimately down to the waterfront. And you might be thinking, well, green spine, how are you going to get that green spine over Highway 401? That's a very good question, but the feeling is that in time, as Seatalk develops and as the waterfront develops, there are more amenities in both areas, including the GO station. There'll be a strong need and desire for, in time, a very significant pedestrian bicycle bridge over the 401. But that certainly is a long-term objective, but something that is fundamental to this green spine, which is all about moving people to and from, to and through the Seatalk area. And finally, the notion of a civic heart with places to gather. As you'll see later on, we have quite a significant population planned for this area, and really it will become a kind of city within a city within the municipality of Clarington, and we'll have a great variety of things for people to do, and that will draw people from far and wide. So the idea of a civic heart kind of around the GO station is really a central idea to the land use plan we've developed. Moving on, Jamila, next slide. So I won't spend a lot of time walking through the land use options, but just to give you a sense of the work that was done, we created 3 options that looked at the land use districts that you see at the bottom here: a mixed use inner core, mixed use outer core, transit oriented neighborhood, an office district, as well as industrial areas and a couple of other areas, including an outer neighborhood, which is focused west of Trolls Road. So you see different approaches to distributing those land uses, as well as different approaches to locating future major parks. As you can see, they're all based on the same road network. Go to the next slide. This just simply illustrates the range of different building types that could be accommodated in the land use districts that we had developed for those land use options. And you'll see we've tweaked the names of these districts in developing the preferred land use plan, but the general idea remains the same, that certainly within the MTSA area, at the heart of the Seatalk area, we want to be sure that we can achieve a density that's going to support future transit use. It's both folks using the GO station, but as well local transit services. But that can be done, as you can see illustrated here, in everything from low-rise, kind of higher density townhouse form development all the way up to tall buildings. Next slide, sorry, Jamila. Okay, well, let's now shift to the preferred land use plan, but first let's begin with the road network. We have made some adjustments to the road network you saw in the land use options based on kind of further technical study. We have, by the way, with us today, Stephen Keene from SEMA Plus, who's been supporting us with transportation and servicing analysis. And you can appreciate that fundamental to any the design of any community is determining where these major roads go. And of course, they will be complemented by many, many local streets that we'll talk a little bit about later. But this gives you the infrastructure framework really for the land use plan. You can see there the green spine. This can be carried forward from that framework diagram I just showed you, along with the hierarchy of roads. We can move on. Next slide. There we go. Ta-da. So here is the draft preferred land use plan. So I'll just take a moment here to describe the land use districts and some of the other elements of the plan. So you see, starting from the center, a high density, what we're calling the mixed use core. So as I mentioned earlier, this would be the area for the highest densities, but also the broadest range of uses. Then around this mixed use core, we have what we're calling now the mixed use transition area. We had a slightly different name. It was the outer core area before. We've just kind of changed the name of it, but the intention is the same. This is also an area for high density development, but development that will actually provide a transition from taller buildings in the core to more mid-rise and lower forms of development as you move further west and north in the Seatalk area. I should have mentioned in that mixed-use core area, the hatched area. You see the black hash marks there indicate where we see a focus for future retail and other active uses lining those streets close to the GO station. So as folks that are kind of walking or cycling or to the GO station are passing by amenities on their way, restaurants, shops, that type of thing. There, of course, will be many other, in fact, anywhere within these red areas, retail and other commercial uses will be permitted. So there's lots of flexibility in terms of where retail can go, but we definitely want to get it on those two streets. Also within the mixed-use core, we've identified what we're calling a transit zone and a transit facility zone, which is really simply identifying where we envision facilities required to support the GO stations, such as pickup and drop-off facilities, bus stops, gathering places, and very importantly, parking. Perhaps surface parking in the short term, but over time, structured parking to support the GO station. Eventually, this would be integrated with development, which is why the area is still all red. So the idea is that everywhere in red ultimately will be higher density development. But in that transit zone, it's quite possible that there will be a need to incorporate facilities related to the station. Let's move on now to the medium density residential area to the north and west of Charles Road. So this is an area for generally low-rise forms of development, but relatively dense. So stacked townhousing, back-to-back townhousing. Oh, thank you. Moving on to the policy directions. Why don't we go back just for a moment, Jamila? The medium density area is for those low forms of development that nonetheless come in a very compact form. And the yellow areas are the low density residential areas that are quite familiar throughout Courtice today, but we hope in time we'll have a real mix of detached housing, semi-detached housing, and town housing as well. Another key element of the preferred land use plan are what we're calling neighborhood parks, major neighborhood parks. We have 4 of them here, one to the north, one to the west, one to the east, and one within, just at the edge of the mixed-use core. So these are major gathering places for a range of recreational facilities, and they will be complemented by many other parks and parkettes. You see the little circles there with a P, so they indicate the general locations for additional parks. And then finally, in the very middle of the CTOC area, you see the SP symbol there. That represents the special park. This is a civic park, something that you are unlikely to see anywhere else in Clarington, which is a major civic gathering place that includes a lot of green space, but also spaces for festivals, for other kinds of gatherings. You might even put a building in that park, such as a library or a small recreational facility. So it's a true central gathering place, not just for folks living within the CTOC area, but for people that might come from far wide across Clarington. I'll just quickly mention at the south edge of the CTOC area, our area is primarily for employment. We still have 2 areas designated for employment in the region's official plan. These are the areas in light blue and in the kind of turquoisey blue on the right-hand side, where light industrial uses will be the primary uses. And the purple area, though, which is actually within the CTOC area, we expect this to be the most a desirable location for employment uses as well that benefit from exposure to Highway 401. But we do envision that along Baseline Road, it would be possible to incorporate what we call live-work units. So it's basically housing that's built into mixed-use buildings and where small businesses can be operated out of those residential units. And I think with that, we can now move on to the next slide. So I've covered much of this information on the next few slides by describing each of those land use districts, but I'll just hit a few key points here. So I've already described the mixed use core, the range of uses there, which would include not just housing, of course, but office, retail, institutional uses. This is an area where we see the built form comprising mostly, as you see in the pictures here, residential towers on mid-rise, low and mid-rise podiums of 4 to 6 stories in height generally. And in the base of many of those buildings on the ground floor will be retail uses where it's appropriate, but also townhouse type units, 2-story units that are built into the podiums. We are looking for a density, a minimum density in this area of 400 units per net hectare to support the GO station, and heights up to 40 stories. Along the more busier roads, the arterial roads, we're looking to have minimum heights of 6 stories. And finally, we do want to make sure we do get some employment uses beyond retail uses within the mixed use core. So we're looking for at least 10% office space within 200 on sites within 250 meters of the future GO station. Next slide.
So we'll do a poll here, Tim.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I did miss that icon. I knew I'd missed that one. We do have a question for you. Pop that up, Jamila. So just curious, how frequently do you use GO Transit services today? The train, of course, hasn't come to Courtice yet or Bowmanville, but I'm sure many of the folks here do use GO at least occasionally, and do you use it more frequently? Okay, so about 2/3 of folks aren't GO users, and just one person uses it on a regular routine basis. I know we don't have a ton of people that, actually living in Courtice today in our meeting, but I'm sure once the station is there, we'll see a lot of people using that service 5 days a week. Okay, I think we can move on, Jamila.
Yep.
So as I mentioned, the mixed use transition area, again, an area for higher density uses, the same range of uses that are permitted in the mixed use core. There's a bit more flexibility in terms of dwelling types here. What would be permitted besides apartment buildings would be stacked townhouses and back-to-back townhouses, those much more denser forms of townhousing. Here we're looking for a minimum density of 200 units per hectare, so about half of what we're looking for in the core area, and building heights of up to 25 stories. Again, at least 6 stories along those busy roads. Next slide.
Apologies, there's a bit of a delay.
And the medium density area. So there's a wide range of dwelling types permitted here. I didn't mention the low rise buildings as well. It just went a bit too far there, Jamila.
Sorry, just gonna click it. Apologies, folks. Yeah, medium density.
There we go. Yeah, range of uses here, low-rise housing. So this is an area of predominantly 3 to 4 story buildings, although along the busier arterial and collector roads, heights could go up to 6 stories. So apartment buildings, stacked townhouses, back-to-back townhouses, and in some locations, traditional townhouses integrated with some of these other forms. Here we're looking for a minimum density of 65 units per hectare. And to give you a sense, a more traditional townhouse development would be in the range of 35 or 40 units per hectare, so you can get a sense of the mix of other low-rise forms of housing we'd be seeking. Next slide. And in that low density area, as I mentioned earlier, this is really a more traditional neighborhood form of single semi-detached housing, as well as traditional townhouses. And consistent with the recent provincial planning reforms that open the door for greater housing diversity in all neighborhoods, including what traditionally have been single detached neighborhoods. Duplexes, triplexes would also be permitted. The minimum density in this area would be 25 units per hectare, and the heights of up to 3 stories would be permitted. Oh, I should point out here that although we expect the low density residential area and the medium density residential area I just described to be almost entirely made up of housing, there will be opportunities at key intersections for smaller scale retail and service uses to ensure that those amenities are close to where people are living. So although we see most of the retail in CTOC being focused within the core area and transition area, there certainly will be opportunities within the lower scale neighborhoods for some smaller scale neighborhood oriented commercial uses. Mixed use office district, as I described, that small blue area at the south end of the CTOG. Oh, sorry, I guess it's more purple. It wasn't blue, that's right. Blue. This is an area that we're seeing primarily being used for office buildings and some lighter industrial, kind of clean industrial buildings, as well as some complementary retail and service uses, and hotels would also be appropriate here. Heights of up to 6 stories. Next slide. And the industrial areas at either end of the CTOC area along the 401 there's not a huge difference between these two areas. They're really going to both permit a range of generally light industrial uses. Fundamental difference will be that within the light industrial area on the west side of CTOC, there will be no outdoor storage permitted. We expect light industrial uses to be wholly enclosed within a building, have a high standard of landscaping, generally be more attractive than what you might see in the general industrial area, where there'll be a little bit more flexibility with respect to the design of buildings, and some outside storage will be permitted. Heights of up to 4 stories would be appropriate. All right, I mentioned that we're planning for a significant population in CTOC. You can see the numbers here based on not just those minimum densities I outlined, but actually some target densities which are slightly higher for each area. We do anticipate over time that the minimum densities will be exceeded as this area becomes more attractive to a wide range of folks. So we're looking at about over 33,000 people living in CTOC in time, over 8,000 jobs, to give us an average density of about 160 people and jobs per hectare. I'll just quickly cover some of the other kind of emerging policy directions that are more general in nature, not tied specifically to those land use designations I just took you through. With regard to local streets, as I mentioned, there'll be many local streets to be designed in time. We expect that almost all of those streets will need to accommodate vehicles, including transit vehicles, as well as pedestrians and cyclists. Under the municipality's kind of new standards for roads, these will be very pedestrian and bike-friendly streets for the most part. In some cases, we do see opportunities once the density is there, and depending on the nature of the retail environments developers want to create, there will be opportunities for pedestrian-only streets. And you see an example in the top right image there. And that's a street that's actually a bit of a flex street. It can be closed to allow just pedestrians to stroll, as you see there, and on some occasions opened up to allow vehicular traffic. But no surprise, we're creating a very urban environment here where pedestrians and cyclists should have very generous spaces to move around. Next slide. With respect to parks, parks are very fundamental to the quality of life in any neighborhood, and this is true not just in a low density neighborhood, but in high density one as well. In fact, if anything, parks become more important as sort of the backyards for folks in high density areas. So we do have a target of at least 10% of the land in CTOC being used for park space. I showed you those little round circles on the land use plan to show the general locations for some future parks. There will be flexibility when it comes to where exactly those parks are and how big they are. But they will be in the range of at least 1.5 hectares each. With respect to those major parks, not as much flexibility with the location of those. There might be a little tweaking to the boundaries of those to work better with plans of subdivision as they are submitted. I mentioned the special park, and you can see some of the key criteria there. It will be designed to be a multi-use space, at least 2.5 hectares inside, size, and have a considerable green space on it for passive enjoyment. Next slide. Schools. I didn't actually highlight this when I was describing the preferred land use plan, but we have identified potential school sites. It can be tricky to determine precisely where future schools are located because it all depends on how quickly uh, the community grows and how it grows, what types of families move here, and how quickly a population of students is generated. But we have shown desirable locations for schools, generally adjacent to future parks. We are anticipating up to about 6 elementary schools and 2 secondary schools will be required in the CTOC area. One high school is likely to be needed in more of the near term, not in the immediate future, but in the north, toward the north part of the CTOC area, and one later on, which we anticipate will be within or very close to the core area. Primary schools will be on collector roads and secondary schools will be on arterial roads. And there will be policies in the secondary plan that encourage innovative approaches to incorporating schools into mixed-use developments. There are standards that we need to respect today with how schools are built, but there is a recognition that everywhere in areas that are intensifying and focusing more on supporting transit and being more walkable and using land efficiently, that standards for schools are evolving to require less land and to, in some cases, be integrated with mixed-use development. This can be a challenge, so we have to make sure we provide the flexibility needed to ensure that the schools get the land they need and the facilities they need to function properly. But the policies will ensure that there is encouragement for innovative ways of building schools. A little bit on urban design. We can appreciate in a high density environment, and we've already touched on some key urban design elements, such as ensuring the area is pedestrian and bike friendly. But urban design, when it comes to buildings, will be a key consideration. We want to make sure that they're framing public streets coming up close to the edge of rights of ways. Certainly in the mixed-use core and the transition area where we have those active street edges and a very vibrant public realm. As you move into neighborhood areas, the medium and low density areas, these areas should have more of a neighborhood character with landscaped front yards, not necessarily big wide yards, but very treed streetscapes, again, in keeping with the neighborhood character. Tall buildings, as I mentioned, will take a podium and tower form. We want to make sure we have good separation between towers so that there's plenty of sunlight getting down to the pedestrian realm and good views to the sky. So we're looking for a minimum separation distance of 30 meters. And we want to make sure that mid-rise buildings, which is generally those over 7-8 stories, step back a little bit as they get taller to ensure that they're not overwhelming the pedestrian environment. And finally, underground parking is something we expect will be the norm in many parts of the CTOC area, perhaps not everywhere, where it needs to be accommodated, whether at grade or above ground, in above ground structures. We want to make sure those facilities are screened by other uses. I mentioned the transit facility zone. I don't think there's much more to say here. I mentioned the kind of facilities we imagine being accommodated there. We will be working with Metrolinx. Their plans are advancing for stations such as the one in Courtice. And at this stage, we want to make sure that Metrolinx has the flexibility it needs to ensure that it can support that station and those who will use it. As I mentioned, we do see over time that station will evolve from something that's a little bit more car-oriented, something that's much more pedestrian-oriented, with facilities being integrated with future mixed-use development to the greatest degree possible.
And we're just going to launch another poll.
Thank you, Jamelia.
So we have 2 last poll questions. I can get this to launch. Okay, sorry, it's just loading.
It's a good chance for everyone to catch their breath. I know we're throwing a lot of information at you. So.
Yeah. Seems to be frozen. We can circle back, but maybe we want to go into the discussion questions next.
Okay. Yeah, so that really is the overview of the preferred land use plan, some key policy directions. So as Jamila outlined at the beginning of the presentation, this meeting is all about, well, it's about sharing information with you, but then spending the rest of the meeting hearing from you. Does what we're presenting with the preferred land use plan align with your vision for the area? Is there anything that you think is missing from the plan? And what do you like most about the plan? What do you think where we really hit the mark well? Are there some parts of the plan you think need a little more consideration? Maybe we haven't got quite right yet. So that's the kind of feedback we'd like, but we'd also like to address any questions you might have about all the information we shared today. So I would like to start with questions if we can, but I'm going to take some direction from Emily and Jamila based on the comments and questions coming in from the chat. Although I've just opened up the chat.
We do have some questions, Tim. The first one we have is there funding and or cooperation from the province to establish a safe, active transportation corridor to the waterfront and major employment clusters south of 401? This is an essential piece of infrastructure.
I'm not sure if that comment specifically speaking about that big pedestrian bridge I mentioned earlier. I couldn't say there is commitment, frankly, from anyone to build something like that at this stage. It literally is a line on a plan at the moment. And of course, this is all draft material that we're inviting comment on. As I mentioned, we'll be having more discussions with Metrolinx and potentially inviting other comments from the province, including the Ministry of Transportation, on all the elements within the land use plan, including that connection. It is one of those pieces of infrastructure that will require much more detailed planning and costing. And as I said, it's not something that's likely going to be near term. There simply wouldn't be the demand for it until CTOC sees a significant amount of development until the station's built. So I think it's a bit premature to expect a kind of commitment from anyone, but the first step is to actually get that connection into a plan. And once it's in the secondary plan, it should become the trigger for that more detailed planning and eventual commitment to build it.
Okay, another question from the chat. For the businesses that are located between Courtice Road and Trolls Road on the north side, are they going to be forced to relocate their businesses?
This is an excellent question, actually, and not a surprising one at all. Of course, CTOC in many respects you might think of as being largely undeveloped, but it absolutely is not the case. South of the rail corridor, there are a number of active industrial businesses there. So I'm glad this question came up. The short answer is no. Businesses will not be forced to relocate under the Planning Act. Every use will continue to be a permitted use as it is today. Now, if there are significant changes proposed to some of those uses, they may have difficulty getting permission, quite frankly, to continue that use under the secondary plan. But those can be looked at on a case by case, depending on the nature of the change being proposed. So there will be a recognition of those businesses in the secondary plan as existing and uses that can continue to be will continue to be permitted. That's clearly the case. What we are trying to do with the secondary plan, as one can expect, is to encourage over time redevelopment of those lands, quite frankly, to other uses. So, but it really very much will be up to the landowners when that happens to their individual property.
And another question, what consideration is given for existing industrial employers and owners?
I think I might have I think that was essentially the same question. If there's anything more specific about that, I think I've just responded to that one.
And I might just add, our next step will be to take any feedback received here tonight and also following this meeting. Any feedback you have, you can submit it to us at our project email, courticetoc@clarington.net, and we'll be taking your feedback as we move forward with drafting the secondary plan policies. So we will for sure be having policies in the secondary plan that speak to existing uses and businesses. That's our next step.
Yes, thank you, Emily. And one other comment I should also add, though, not only can existing uses continue as they are, but as new uses come in to that area on, say, adjacent properties that are adjacent to an active industrial uses, the new uses are going to have to demonstrate compatibility with those existing uses. So the onus will be on the new uses to ensure that any impacts, whether it's, well, typically it would be noise, are mitigated in the new development, and studies would have to be done to demonstrate that there will be compatibility. So we're not, although the policies in the plan are certainly going to encourage redevelopment of some of these industrial uses in time, there's, again, not, there's also a recognition we need to protect those uses that are viable and want to continue.
Okay, great. And I think you touched on this question as well, but I'll just read it aloud and move to the next one. Relocating industry is extremely expensive. The municipality would cover all the costs involved?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer, only because we're not anticipating a need for industry to be relocated, except by the owner of one of those industries at their discretion, and only when it would make sense for that to happen for them. It would only be in the case where the municipality or some other level of government, for whatever reason, decides that an industry needs to be relocated to make way for another, typically a public use, where expropriation may be required and the costs of relocating that industry may need to be dealt with then. But again, we're recognizing those uses there and not expecting that area of CTOC to change in any short time frame. Of course, there may be a lot of interest in developers to acquire those lands, but again, the control is really very much with the landowners in terms of what happens to those properties.
Okay. Next question. What is the plans for the residents that live on trolls and their homes that are being zoned within this plan?
Well, again, similar to the industrial businesses south of the rail corridor, if folks are living elsewhere in the area, they certainly can continue to live there. So I'm assuming this is some of the folks living in the old farmsteads on Trolls Road. At the moment, these lands will be subject to the secondary plan, and in concert with the secondary plan, we'll be developing a zoning bylaw for the entire CTOC area. But to repeat myself one more time, really the choices about what happens to those lands is very much up to the landowners.
When is the GO station expected to start construction, and is the funding approved?
Ooh, I should have anticipated this question coming in. Emily or Lisa, maybe you have a bit more information on that. My understanding is that the more detailed planning for the extension is underway, but I don't know that a time frame for construction has been made public.
Yes, so there is a Metrolinx page, and we can certainly reach out to Metrolinx on your behalf, but we will provide the contact information for Metrolinx in the chat for the Bonesville extension project. And any questions about that can be directed to the project team. I don't think that information is available, but Lisa, if you have anything, please join in.
No, timing for funding isn't available at this time.
Okay. Our next question, has Durham Region approved the employment land to residential conversion requests necessary to go forward with CTOC? Will Durham Region's approvals be necessary before CTOC is brought to Clarington's council?
Good question. I'm happy to take this on, but Lisa or Emily, if you want to, that's fine too. Yes, Durham Region has approved the land conversions, the employment land conversions. As I mentioned, there are two areas, the two blue areas that were not converted, but the other, those were not subject to requests for conversions. The others have been. Now, Durham's region's official plan is currently with the province awaiting for sign off from the minister. So although the region's council has approved those, it's technically not enforced until the minister signs off, which no one expects to be an issue. With respect to Durham Region, ultimately, at this stage anyway, as far as we know, we'll be approving the CTOC secondary plan after Clarington's council adopts it. I hesitate there because the province is currently proposed to alter the region's planning authority, and so depending on when council adopts a secondary plan and depending on the timing of any changes to the region's planning authority, it's possible the secondary plan will not require the region's approval. But at this point, at this stage, we are assuming the region will need to approve it. And they are part of our steering committee for the project and actively participating, and we're consulting with them on an ongoing basis to ensure that we align with their official plan and address any other concerns they have.
Okay, I do see Nicole's hand is raised. I'm going to unmute you, Nicole, to ask your question.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, okay, thank you. Again, my name's Nicole. I'm a planner at Humphreys Planning Group, Inc., and we're the planners for one of the landowners within the limits of this secondary plan. So first, I just want to say thank you for this information meeting. It's very helpful. But we do have a couple questions that I'll state now, and then hopefully you can help clarify that. So the first one being, for the limits of the environmental protection area, how are they defined? And I'm not too sure if this included or was including any recent seasonal field investigations for flora, fauna, as well as headwall drainage feature areas or any hydrogeological studies. So that would be my first question. My second question is, what would actually define that hatched environmental constraint area that you see on the land use plan as well? And then I do have a question about the swim facilities. I see that you have them shown kind of throughout the land use plan and on the legend. So I just wanted to question that as well. So those are my three questions. Thank you.
Sure, thanks, Nicole. Those are both excellent questions. I mean, one can probably appreciate looking at the preferred land use plan for CTOC. We are working at a pretty high level, and that really applies to almost every element of the plan. With respect to the environmental areas, those have been largely defined through the Robinson and Tule Creeks watershed study that's been going on for the past few years and is, I think, pretty much wrapped up now. Anyway, they've done the mapping of those features, but it's not based on site-by-site field investigations, as far as I know, and Lisa will jump in if I'm wrong on any of this, but we do anticipate and expect that more detailed environmental studies will be done with development applications to confirm and, where appropriate, refine the boundaries of those environmental protection areas, both the high constraint areas, which right now we've assumed really are not developable areas, and the medium constraint areas where we see the potential maybe for some development on portions of those lands. So the main point here is that the precise limits of those constraint areas will be determined at the time of development applications. So we are at a fairly high level with mapping those. Hopefully we're not way off, given the extensive work that's been done for the subwatershed study. But of course, there are always going to be some features that need more detailed investigation. And that message also really applies to the stormwater management features as well. We've identified general locations for those features, but where precisely they go, how big those features need to be, will be determined at the time of applications. And I should say that it is the intention that a master drainage study will be done for the CTOC area, which will bring a little more clarity to those to those stormwater management features. Lisa, Emily, I don't know if you have anything more to add to that or any corrections.
No, you hit the answers all correctly, Tim.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Okay.
Jamila, why don't we go? I see there's a number of more questions in the chat. We should go back to those. I think
Yes, there's a related question around environmental sustainability and wildlife. So what considerations has been given to the wildlife and biodiversity that is currently present in this area? Are there plans to maintain current stands of trees, forests, to incorporate them into the plans?
Well, Arlene, I think my answer shouldn't surprise you after you've heard the last answer. That is the intention behind the mapping of these environmental protection areas based on the subwatershed study that we have. They really do capture all the certainly significant forested areas, valley lands, etc., where you would expect to see the bulk of the significant wildlife. And of course, those areas will be potentially refined, but that initial work to protect those most significant areas has been done.
Okay, and John, the presentation will be posted on the webpage following the PIC. A comment and a question. Hi, I just want to congratulate staff on this project. I think you've done a great job. Would it be possible for me to meet with or email planning staff to share ideas? We will be providing the contact information, Hattie, at the end of the presentation, where you can reach out to staff about your specific questions for your project. Another question, will the secondary plan include specifications about parking for new developments? That is, will there be parking minimums, or will parking provisions simply be left to the developer to decide?
Wow, they've got some really tough questions here. This is a good crowd. Now, thanks for that. And I hesitate there because we'll be developing a zoning bylaw, as I mentioned, in parallel with the secondary plan. And to be quite honest with you, we don't at this stage know how we're going to be addressing parking. It's something we have to work through with the municipality. My general comment would be that with some forms of development that we expect to be occurring in the near term, and by near term, I would say in the next 5, 10, 15 years. And certainly the development that's likely to happen like before a GO station appears here and transit services at a high level, the parking ratios will very likely be very consistent with the general parking provisions in the municipality for detached homes and townhomes, potentially for apartment buildings as well. What we would see is that the parking standards in the zoning bylaw will need to be revised over time as the area evolves, as hopefully there are many more trips being made by transit, by walking and cycling, and simply a lower demand for parking and a lower need for parking, that the municipality will lower its requirements and in fact may in time put maximums in. So that's, I think, the most clarity I can provide on that question. I don't know if Emily, Lisa want to jump in with anything else, but short term, I think you're looking at standards consistent with what applies elsewhere in Clarington. Longer term, hard to predict right now.
Yeah, and I think just to jump in, we will be drafting the zoning bylaw. And so once we draft that, it will be put out for public review. And so there will be opportunity to provide feedback at that point as well. For feedback.
Okay. The next question, on this new draft land use plan, there are additions to the servicing plan such as stormwater management facilities. How will this affect adjacent new and existing uses?
Yeah, thanks, Sandra. I think I might have answered that question with my previous response. We've identified, again, general locations for swim facilities, but how they're going to relate to adjacent development, what effect they're going to have, will need to be determined at a later stage. There are going to be situations, I assume, where there are going to need to be facilities that are shared among developments, among landowners, and there will need to be kind of a cost sharing agreements in place to ensure that the cost of those are shared equitably and that the impacts on development are fair. That is one of those things that will be addressed at a later stage, and that's one of the challenges of a secondary plan, is ensuring that that work does get done and that the different mechanism needed to ensure those are built in a timely fashion and efficiently are happen. There also is the potential that in some cases there might be the need for temporary facilities that are replaced by more permanent facilities in the longer term. Again, that'll be the subject of kind of future phasing plans. I hope that answers your question. Again, I think what you're looking for is a bit more detail than we're able to provide at the secondary plan level.
Next question, where is the exact location of the proposed green spine connection as it crosses the rail corridor? Does it run through 71 or 83 Sigas Road? And how wide is it?
Ooh, that's a very specific question, and I apologize. I don't know exactly where 71 or 83 Sigas Road is. We are anticipating that the green spine will in fact go underneath the rail corridor through a pedestrian cyclist tunnel. And someone can tell me, I'm drawing a blank on the name of that north-south street that exists south of the rail corridor. I knew it the other day, but I've forgotten it.
Is it Marnie?
Marnie, thank you. Yes, it is. So we would anticipate that that street will remain in its current location. It's quite possible it will. Well, I know it'll need to be redesigned in the fullness of time. Although its width is probably satisfactory. We anticipate as when that road is redesigned that the green spine will be incorporated into it as an extra wide boulevard, most likely accommodating a multi-use path. So perhaps that answers the question. There is the potential. And of course, Marnie Street does not go right to the rail corridor today. And I do not believe there's a protected right of way right to the rail corridor to a future underpass, a future tunnel. So that will be something that will have to be secured through future development. But what we're talking about with the green spine, I mean, it can vary, but it's basically a generous multi-use path, landscape multi-use path. In many cases, it will be part of the right of way for a north-south streets running through CTOC, but there's also the flexibility for it to be accommodated in parkland that is adjacent to those future streets. So that's the idea of it being in the boulevard of a street is not the only solution, but it certainly is an option in all places.
Great. We do have a question in the chat that's about more broader city services, and maybe this is something that city staff could speak to about addressing how landowners are living through this development and how the city can address some of the city services available.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's really a question here, I guess. Might defer to Emily or Lisa maybe to jump in here with this one. I can only provide a general response, which is sometimes change is a little bit hard, and it's others harder than others, and it simply takes time for all the benefits one expects to be realized. Lisa, Emily, do you want to add anything to this?
I think I might actually ask Karen if she, just because the
Oh,
question's
Karen,
related
yeah.
to infrastructure. Specifically, this person's noted water and sewer lines in the area. So maybe Karen, you could speak to that.
Yeah, I can add some information on that. So the region is completing the sanitary trunk sewer that's currently going up Charles Road. I believe it's almost at Bloor Street. So that is a trunk service, so there's no local connections to that. So the local sewers are not being put in until the development moves forward. And it's pretty much the same for water main. There's a water main going in across Baseline and up. And then there's also some water that's a water main required across Bloor Street, also between Trolls and Courtice Road. So those are all projects that are done through the region and will move forward when development moves forward.
Okay, thanks, Karen.
Great.
Jamila, I'm seeing the next question here about stormwater management facilities again.
Yeah.
And Simon is wondering if there's flexibility in the locations of these. A general response, Simon, would be that at this stage, this is a draft plan. So frankly, everything in it is, nothing in it is fixed at this point. So if you have comments, any study that you've done that would give us reason to change the locations of those swim facilities, then by all means, please share it with us. My understanding is we've been fairly consistent with the subwater shed study. We can certainly double check to see that's the case. We, not surprisingly, have identified these facilities where there are lower areas in the CTOC area, where we, based on topographical mapping, but also what is identified in the subwater study. So we can do that correction. If there's anything you want to share with us that might give us more detailed information, that would certainly be appreciated.
Okay, and I think our last question again touches on infrastructure. It might have already been captured in Karen's response, but are most of the infrastructure plans for sanitary and water been completed in the CTOC area?
That's a good question, and Karen may want to jump in here. The region has done a high-level servicing plan for the area. In fact, is building new services in the area today, as Karen just mentioned. There will be, of course, more services need to be provided as development moves in. So that more detailed servicing plan has not been done yet. As part of the secondary plan work, SEMA will be undertaking a functional servicing report that describes in more detail servicing plan for the area. Again, it will still be at a relatively high level, with future applications getting into greater detail. Anything you want to add to that, Karen?
No, you did very well, Tim. Thank you.
Great. I don't see any other hands up or any additional questions in the chat. I think.
Oh, we just got
we're
one
just-
more, I think, from Roger.
Yeah. Are there any more background studies undertaken that support your proposed plan, and will they be posted to the website?
Yes, we just mentioned the functional servicing plan that will be done by SEMA, along with the transportation impact study that they'll be preparing as well. So those are the two key technical studies to be done and are underway, and will be coming forward with the draft secondary plan for public review in the new year. So you'll need to be patient. They'll all be coming together, but they all should be supporting one another.
And we have one more question from Bart. Will there be a policy direction so that all roads in the planning area, local or arterial, have safe, active transportation routes adjacent?
Short answer is yes, Bart. And now, I mean, what constitutes a safe, active transportation route, I guess, is maybe up for discussion. The municipality is moving towards integrating multi-use pathways and more than a sidewalk on, I'll just say, all of its major roads, including most, if not all of its collector roads. Local streets, I can't say at the moment that every single local street will have a bike lane or a multi-use path. I would say that generally will not be the case because we're going to be designing those local streets to be safe shared facilities for the most part, with sidewalks on both sides, certainly for pedestrians. But those are details that we are looking at more closely as we develop both the secondary plan and the design guidelines that will complement the plan.
Okay. I'm going to switch to our next step slides. If you have any further questions, you can see how to get in touch.
Thanks, Jamila. So this is our last kind of slide here. And so what's next for the Courtice Transit Oriented Community Secondary Plan? And so following tonight's meeting, we will be posting a presentation of the project webpage. And I think we anticipate within a week, Jamila, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay.
Yep.
And so we'll post the presentation within the week and also the a video of this meeting to the project webpage. And we welcome any additional comments that you may have not had the opportunity to raise here tonight, or if you think of any following the meeting that are specific to the preferred land use plan that we've shared today and the associated policy direction that we've presented. And so you can send your comments to Courtice at Clarington.net. And we will be accepting comments until November 30th. And then from here, we will take your comments and prepare the draft secondary plan, urban design guidelines for the secondary plan. And we'll also be completing the technical transportation service and studies, as Tim mentioned. And so we're aiming to present these draft documents at a statutory public meeting in February or March 2024. And so at this point, there will be an additional opportunity to provide review and feedback on these documents. And lastly, if you have any questions or like to reach out, you can contact myself or Lisa Backus. Our emails are listed there, or you can reach out to the project email, CourticeTOC@Clarington.net. And if you're not on the mailing list, please let us know if you'd like to be notified of any further updates for this project. Okay, thanks everyone for your participation this evening. I do see one more question though in the chat before I wrap up. So a comment, I like the idea of the special park. What's the reasoning for having it a block away from the GO station instead of directly in front?
I'm going to ask my colleague Warren to address that question if you'd like.
Okay.
The location of a park is you want to have it close, but not too close. And so I think the distance would be about 300 meters from the GO station. And what this gives us the opportunity is that you can kind of provide the kind of infrastructure and density around the GO station that the creation of that transit really supports, and that the park becomes almost like a bit of a destination that you can walk to, and that route becomes a very attractive way to kind of position retail and other services and amenities along that route in a way that kind of really reinforces the pedestrian connections back and forth. Sometimes if you put the park right on top of the train station, all the traffic, all the activity overwhelms the park. And indeed, you don't actually get enough space to kind of support that other development, that other economic opportunity that comes along with it. So we find the kind of distance that we positioned is sort of the sweet spot, not too close, but not too far.
Thanks, Warren. Yeah, I'll just add too that although we're not showing a open space at the station, we will anticipate, in fact, I'm sure there will be a policy direction that ensures that there is a gathering space, a square, if you will, a transit square adjacent to that station to simply provide the kind of space that pedestrians need. But it could also be something that is programmed to have like a farmer's market in it or some kind of other sorts of events. So although we're making a big deal about the special park being the main central gathering place, there's going to be lots of opportunities for other types of open spaces to complement it as a gathering space, including at the station. I wanted to make just one more comment, because I know we have a number of landowners, business owners, and consultants joining us today, which we appreciate. I just wanted to kind of request that if any of you have plans for your sites or anything you want to share with us that you might want us to consider as we're developing policies for the area or finding the land use plan, please be sure to submit those to Emily so that they can inform our thinking.
Yes, so any feedback or anything you'd like to share with us would be appreciated and helpful as we kind of move to the next step here. Of course, this is all draft, so we're still able to make changes based on feedback we receive here tonight. And so with that, I just want to say thank you very much, everyone, for taking the time to participate in this meeting session. And we hope you have a great rest of your evening. Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Take care,
everyone.
everyone. Thank you.